Hello again, watch friends. Welcome back. And now for something completely different, as Monty Python was often fond of saying. A while back, I did a video where I discussed moving from a 2006 BMW 3 Series wagon to a 2018 3 Series wagon. I mentioned what I liked and disliked about each car, and what was both similar and dissimilar of the two. I also mentioned that my very first BMW was a 1967 1600. The car that started me on my BMW journey, as it were. I'd like to share some memories of that car right now. I bought my first BMW in the spring of 1974, shortly after my then current car was stolen. In 1974, a brand new 2002 BMW off the dealer showroom cost about $4,000, similar to the cost of tuition and room and board at a small private college. Today, a BMW 3 Series sedan still costs about the same as 1 year at a small private college. So when people say BMWs are expensive, well, yes, they are. But not all that more, relatively, when they were first available in the United States. I believe I paid about $1,200 for the car. It was 8 years old at the time. And over the course of the following year or so, I put another $1,200 into it. I had the 4-speed transmission rebuilt. I put in new brakes. I think I replaced the radiator, and I know I replaced the starter. As I said, this was my first BMW, and I recall just having so much fun driving it. It only had 85 horsepower, with 106 foot-pounds of torque, but the car weighed a mere, by today's standards, 2,070 pounds, so it was easy to drive and easy to toss around. It was especially at home on less frequented suburban streets and country roads. Such a joy to drive, and really a new experience for me. According to the datasheet, 0 to 62 time was a slow 13.3 seconds. But it never felt slow. Rolling through the gears allowed one to maximize the power delivery. But remember, this was a 1967 car. No emissions controls or other high-tech power-robbing engine contraptions. In 1974, there were very few BMWs on the road. As a result, we often flashed headlights at one another to say hi. The headlight switch was a pull knob on the dashboard, and the low-high beam and flasher was a stalk on the left side of the steering column. Interestingly, the turn signal stalk was on the right side. Just one of many novel, at least to me, features of the car. Once, I was in a small town in West Virginia and got a parking ticket. On the ticket, the vehicle name was listed as Renault. I guess the officer had never seen a BMW before, or maybe didn't know how to read. As I mentioned, one of the repairs I did while I had the car was to replace the starter motor. Sometimes the car would not start when I turned the key in the ignition to fart. Yes, the German word, the verb to drive, fart, F-A-H-R-T, was on the ignition switch, and I gleefully pointed this out to all my friends and family repeatedly. I'm more mature now. Maybe. Anyway, it turned out that the starter motor was missing some teeth, kind of like my grandfather. And since they wouldn't engage, that is, the teeth, the car would not start. My remedy, being a clever young man, for the month or so that I had this problem, was to always park the car on a hill. Then when I returned to the car and wanted to start it, I would, as the car got rolling, pop the clutch to start the car. How many of you remember jump-starting a manual transmission car like that? If you are of a certain age, you probably do. Some other memories. In addition to being simply fun to drive, the car had a low belt line, so visibility was excellent. It also had a surprisingly large trunk for a small car, about 16 cubic feet. The interior was large, it seemed, clearly comfortable for 4 adults. I used to joke that it was bigger on the inside than on the outside. The 1967 and earlier models still had a 6-volt battery, so jump-starting from another car's battery was out of the question, since 99% of other cars on the road had 12-volt batteries at the time. The car had a choke, which I often had to use in cold weather to get the engine started. And when was the last time you had a car with a manual choke? The dashboard instruments were simple: a speedometer, no tachometer, a clock, and 2 gauges, gas and temperature. You shifted the gears by the sound of the engine. It was easy to learn and easy to do. It's interesting that the brochure I have, which was printed in January 1967, emphasizes safety. It goes on to say, BMW was the first German car manufacturer to offer standard disc brakes. The suspension, wishbone suspension in the front, independent rear, according to the brochure, for safe and reliable road holding. Not mentioned was the fun factor, which was readily apparent to anyone who drove the car for even a short period. The car also had 4-speed, short-throw, synchro-mesh transmission, a 4-cylinder overhead cam engine, 1,573 cc's, hence the name 1600. This was back in the days when BMW named its cars based on the engine size. 13-inch wheels, puny by today's standards, and radial tires back when radial tires were not as prevalent. Oh, and it got 26 miles per gallon on regular gas. I had a continuing overheating problem with this car, almost since I got it. I think I remember a BMW tech telling me once that the engine had a warped head or some such thing. What I clearly remember is having the heater going full blast in the summertime to try and get the engine temperature down because it was overheating. Finally, in the fall of 1975, an hour into an 8-hour trip to West Virginia from New Jersey, the engine threw a rod and self-destructed. It would have cost too much to repair given the car's worth, and besides, I didn't have that money at the time. That concluded my first, but not last, experience with BMWs and turned me into a lifelong BMW guy. By the way, the experience that turned me into a lifelong BMW guy was the driving enjoyment, not the engine issues. So, that's my 1967 1600 that I fondly remember. I'm Art Lamberger, and this is my channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll come back again soon. Feel free to subscribe to be alerted of new contents as I upload them. Until then, see ya.